Facebook to pull up. Facebook, there you are. Let's see who's in the room. Are the people coming in the room? I'm so excited this evening. I'm going to give a couple of seconds for the people to come up in the room. I tried to give you a little bit of a delay so that, people can come back and whatnot. I did an intro earlier today that I was so excited about this topic. And so I am excited that you guys are coming on. So hello to my people on Instagram Live. Hello to my Facebook friends. I see a couple of you there. Dr. Pam Hill, Alvin King, Sherry Hamilton Peku. How are you? I see you guys on there and we are about to begin. I'm so excited that this is the opener for my season 2. So we'll just jump right into it. So today's topic or episode is entitled Sexual Harassment in the Workplace. And this was something that I was inclined to talk about because a friend of mine had shared an incident. And, in sharing the incident, it kind of made me think. It made me think of how she looked at things and how other people looked at things, and as the story is being told and you start to hear other pieces of the story, it kind of makes you just wonder on all aspects, what are people thinking? And then not only what are people thinking just about the incident itself, but then what are they thinking about what to do? And then when the incident is brought to other parties, those who would be those persons who would have control over resolving the issues, you want to know, what are they thinking? So I just kind of wanted to know, what is everybody thinking? So before we start, or as we start, I just want to kind of give you a couple of statistics that I found. So basically, you guys know that, let me introduce myself since we are going into season 2. My name is Dr. Rashawn Broadnex. I'm a hair loss practitioner here in the Washington, D.C. area. And I study hair loss in its various forms, the causes and different holistic ways of remedying hair loss as well as retarding hair loss, because not all hair loss can be, I guess we want to say, cured or stopped. But what we can do is we can slow it down. Some forms of hair loss can be reversed. So those are all the various things that I study. And so that's pretty much the practice that I'm in. So, but as it relates to this, I am also a human resource management, I guess, field person. That is what my degree is in. And so for the past few years, I've kind of studied a lot of case studies as it relates to human resources and how the workplace deals with the human resource office, how the human resource office benefits, as well as just operates within the workplace, and things that would be funneled through a human resource manager or a human resource office. So I just want to jump right in and give you a couple of statistics as it relates to sexual harassment in the workplace. So part of what I've researched is not only sexual harassment in the general workplace, but as it relates to the beauty industry, because that is the industry that we're in, and that is the industry that I have the most contact with as of right now. But some statistics, as of 2015, it says that 54% of American women have experienced unwanted advances. 30% of these women, or 30% of these advances, were from men. So that means that the other 24% may have been from other women. As of January 2018, 81% of women have experienced unwanted advances. So that's a dramatic increase, almost of 30%. I'll say roughly 26%, but a dramatic increase just within a couple of years of women who've experienced unwanted sexual advances. 43% of men experience unwanted sexual advances. Now that's something that's kind of different, because when we think of sexual harassment, I think consciously or commonly we hear about it from the woman's point of view, but these statistics are based off of reports. So we know that 81% of women have reported unwanted sexual advances, and 43% of men have reported unwanted sexual advances. Then we have 3 out of 4 women have been verbally harassed. 3 out of 4. So if you think about how many women, just think about all the women that you know in your life. Stop for a minute and just think about it. All the women that you know in your life. And then 3 out of 4 of those women have reported verbal harassment, verbal sexual harassment. And so that lends to the cat calls, just lewd things that are being said to them, unwanted pressures of a verbal nature to, hopefully lead up to some type of sexual activity. But all those things, 3 out of 4 women, to me, that was, that's 75%. So 75% of women experience that. Then we have 77% of women. Okay, see, this is just like what I'm saying. The exact percentage is 77% of women have reported verbal sexual harassment, whereas 51% have reported being sexually touched. 27% of women have survived sexual assault. So now these are statistics that I thought I would just open up with, just to kind of give you an idea of how prevalent this is, not only within the beauty industry, but as a whole. But I see it, I would say, a lot more because that is the industry that I'm in. So I hear about it. I may see it, come across it a little more frequently within the beauty industry. So what is sexual harassment? That may be said, maybe the question for some people. Well, how do we categorize sexual harassment? So according to the definition, sexual harassment is any behavior that is characterized by the making of unwanted and inappropriate sexual remarks or physical advances in the workplace or professional setting or social setting. So the key to that, as I continue to read, it was saying that the key to sexual harassment is really unwanted and unwelcome or inappropriate. Unwanted, unwelcome, and inappropriate. So if you ever think, if you ever question, are you the victim, or, I don't like to use the word victim, but if you are on the receiving end of any type of sexual harassment, I think it would be clearly defined if the harassment was unwanted, unsolicited, and inappropriate. And it could be either in a professional or social environment. So not all sexual harassment, of course, occurs in a workplace. It can occur in something that you would consider to be a social environment, a bar, the movie theater, anywhere where you may out to dinner with somebody, And so one example that I kind of touched on as I kind of did the prelude to this episode was talking about my experience in working in the beauty industry, but along with the fashion industry. So a lot of times I have been backstage monitoring or either running the backstage area of a fashion show as it relates to the beauty aspect, hair and makeup. And so we often see young ladies that move around the environment, and they may not be fully dressed. We understand, those of us who are professional, we understand what is going on backstage behind these shows. We have models from one designer to the next, coming out of clothes, going into clothes. And a lot of times they're not wearing undergarments. They may have on underwear, which may just be like a thong, a very small thong, especially depending on what they are going to be wearing during the show. But they don't have on much. A lot of times I've seen young ladies running and they're covering their chests as they run from one designer to the next. In those environments, to me, that is acceptable. But what is unacceptable then is for a person to comment on what they're seeing or to physically advance against somebody as they're moving. So, to make a cat call or to comment on a young lady that is not dressed, to me, that is very inappropriate, and that will qualify as sexual harassment. To reach out and touch a female that may be moving from one section to the other and she is not fully dressed, like we said before, that would definitely qualify as sexual harassment, unwanted or unsolicited advances in a physical manner. Now, I don't want you to misunderstand, and I don't want you to forget about the men, because so often we see this backstage. And now I think it's a double standard when oftentimes we look at the women and we say, oh, okay, we don't want to say anything about them and their bodies, but it's okay to talk about the men. I think we have to be very careful, because remember, as we go back to the statistic, 43% of men often, 43% of men have reported unwanted sexual advances. And so this could be the men who are walking around in a pair of underwear in the back, you know, a pair of briefs, which might expose them a little more than normal, with no shirt on. And yes, we may get all excited and we like, oh my God, look at that man, look at that man, look at the chest, look at the arms, and da 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 da. But when we do that, that is unwanted attention. We don't know how the male may view that. To reach out and touch, because now this is something that I've seen. People that, you know, are backstage, they see the man walking by and they just feel like they got to touch his chest. You know, they got to, you know, just rub his arm. That is a form of sexual harassment. And so we have to be so careful about what we do in different arenas. You know, we have to just be so mindful of the things that we do and the things that we say, because we have to understand how they affect other people. So let me just go back to my notes here. Any action can be considered sexual harassment when it implicitly or explicitly affects the individual's employment, unreasonably interferes with the individual's work performance, or creates an untimely, hostile, or offensive work environment. So any advance that may have taken place that now has a negative or adverse reaction within the environment, where the person who was on the receiving end now says, I feel uncomfortable. I don't want to work with this person, or I'm uncomfortable with being in the same space as this person. I'm uncomfortable even now coming to work because I don't know what the person is going to say to further make me uncomfortable, or God forbid this person happens to be a supervisor, a manager, an employer even. You are now afraid of how your negative reaction to their negative advance will affect your job. So that's why I can say we have to be so careful about the things we say and the things we do, because sometimes, though we don't mean to we don't mean it in a negative way, we have to be careful of how the person on the receiving end may perceive it. And when you have to make that type of judgment call, I would say it's best not to say it. Don't touch, don't make comments, because again, you don't know how the person on the receiving end may feel. And sometimes when we feel like, oh, you know, that's my friend, or oh, they're cool, you know, or I see how they interact with other people, because that's the thing, that's a very important point. Sometimes we sit back and we watch people's interactions with others, and we see how they interact with people, and we assume that if they did it, I can do it. So you say you have a young lady who's known this gentleman for many, many years, and that gentleman says, oh, Christine, girl, you wearing that dress? That dress looks so fine. It's hugging all the curves, and da da da. And then so here you come, Christine looking fine in her dress. You feel like you can say it. That's inappropriate, because number one, you don't know Christine like that. Number two, that's an unwanted advance. If she has not put out any intent that she wants some type of attention from you, that can be considered an unwanted advance, and you will find yourself wrapped up in some type of case, be it at work or somewhere else, for sexual harassment. So again, I want to give you some more facts as it as it lends to sexual harassment. It can be a man or woman, and it can even be somebody of the same sex. We often forget about the men. In a lot of cases like this, I'll say within sexual harassment or in, domestic violence, we forget about the men because we so often hear about the women. So the first thing that comes to our mind is something that happens to a woman, but what about the women who harass the men? Because let me give you an example. You have Christopher. This past year, everybody's wearing the fitted pants. So Christopher comes to work, he's dressed all nice in his suit. His suit is tailored to fit his body. Those pants are hugging him in the right places. But here comes Christine. Christine is like, oh, look at Christopher. And she comes up to him and she makes a comment like, oh, Christopher, I see something. Or Christopher, you must be happy to see me. No, Christopher is not happy to see you, Christine. Christopher came dressed for work. He just happens to have on a fitted outfit. Now, the catch-22 is, Christopher, you have to be mindful of how you present yourself. So there is a way to dress in a fitted manner without being overexposing. And see, in talking to a lot of people, and even in a case study that I did during one of my classes, it talked about being the person to comment on something in terms of, like we just spoke, but not meaning it as a sexual advance, but you are putting a person on notice as to what's going on. So you're telling them more or less they need to fix that. Some people will take that, well, why are you looking? Well, I have no choice, but then that becomes the catch-22. Do you say it or do you don't say it? So in my suggestion, you don't mention it. You leave that for Christopher's good girlfriend down the hall to say, okay, Christopher, you out of order. Them pants are too tight. You showing too much. You leave that for them. You don't mention it, because if Christopher don't know you and you don't know him that well to be commenting on what his body looks like in or out of clothing, you don't touch it. So moving on. It can be a supervisor, employer, coworker, or non-employee. It can be anybody who it can be anybody who makes that type of advance for you, which can be, like I said, man, woman, gay, straight, bi, tie, green, blue, all of them. Anybody, it runs the gamut. So nobody is excluded. The victim does not have to be the person harassed, but could also be anyone affected by the offensive conduct. Let me say that one more time, because when I read this, I was kind of surprised. It says the victim does not have to be the person harassed, but I like to say the person harassed only. It could also be anybody who bore witness to what has taken place. Now that is a legal standard. So if Christine and I are walking down the hallway and Christine is looking fine in her dress and she's looking all good, here come Christopher. Christopher decides he wants to speak on Christine's fine curves and the way her dress moves as she moves and the walk and all that kind of stuff. I could say, I'm offended, Christopher, and therefore legally I am also considered, you can consider me as being a party that is a part of the harassed, having been harassed, I should say. So not only is Christine as the primary, I would be the secondary because I bore witness to it. So I'm offended by what Christopher has said. And so I can be also a part of that. Let's see, it may or may not occur with or without economic, industry, or discharge of the victim, meaning that the incident may not necessarily have impact on the income of the victim. It doesn't necessarily have to come down to your boss threatening you about a job, or a supervisor or a manager threatening you with a demotion. It may not have anything to do with any changes in your economic status. However, any unwanted advance can still be considered sexual harassment in or out of the workplace. The most important thing, and I highlighted this on my list, is that, like I said earlier, the conduct that has been displayed has to be considered unwanted. So you cannot make advances. Let me start with the young lady. Christine, you cannot make advances towards Christopher, and then when he makes a comment, you say, no, you're harassing me. And conversely, Christopher cannot talk about Christine looking all fine in her dress and it's moving, it's hugging the curves and all that. And then when she says something about him, he feels offended. That's not how it works. It has to be an unwanted advance, and one party cannot initiate something and then later say it is a form of sexual harassment. So I looked up, or let me say this. As I further researched, I found a lot of information that says a lot of incidents of sexual harassment or misconduct in and without the workplace, in and out of the workplace, are not reported regularly, primarily because the business does not have a method to deal with that kind of grievance. So they don't have anything in place to really say, this is what you need to do if you feel you are sexually harassed. I find that in a lot of smaller businesses, we don't put that kind of paperwork in place. And it's so important because we realize that as things occur, when people look for solutions and they find that things are not in place, that can create a whole different whirlwind of an issue. So I said, okay, well, what are people supposed to do if they feel like they are, I hate saying the victim, but if they feel like they're on the receiving end of the sexual harassment. So one of the first things that a person can do is they need to figure out if any threats have been made. So if I am the person who's had the advance made towards me, I have to look at that advance and say, is there any threat in there? And they say, like with quid pro quo, meaning that if you do something, Christine, if you sleep with me, I'll give you this promotion. Is there type of any quid pro quo with that? And then conversely, Christine, if you don't sleep with me, I'm going to remove you from your position as XYZ. So that's the one thing, is the quid pro quo. We have to figure out if that's any part of what's taking place in the workplace. Number two, you got to document stuff. Now, Lord knows I love to document. I keep notes. I keep copious notes of a lot of things. People don't understand how important keeping notes and documentation is. That is something that I learned from my mother like years ago. With anything that takes place, always keep a record, because you never know when you'll have to refer back to those things. So a lot of times when I love to have conversation via text because I can scroll back up and I can see it. I like to take notes, and then I often screenshot and keep that kind of stuff, or keep that notebook separate from everything else so that I can make sure that I have those notes and things written down as to when it happened, with who, what time, on what date, where we were, if there was any witness to anything that took place. That is how you document things, especially when you have to deal with a case like this. You want to keep those documents in a safe place, because if you decide that you need to go back and you need them, you need to be able to recall on those documents and say, okay, this is where it was, this is what happened, this was who was there, and things like that. It has to be in a safe place because nobody else should have access to it. You don't want anybody else to move, lose, or anything. You need to know exactly where that stuff is in case you need to call upon it. Gather your evidence. Like I said, any text, emails, notes, screenshots, photographs, print out anything that you can, anything that's going to substantiate your case, anything that's going to prove without a shadow of a doubt that you have been harassed. You want to have all that documentation together. Number 5, this is so important. This is so important. And this is why, I felt kind of bad when I heard the particular story of what happened. And then it made me think back about the Bill Cosby case, and then this Harvey Weinstein, all these people that have been going through that are that birthed the Me Too movement, or the Me Too movement was created around them because of the things that they have done. It made me think. Unfortunately, the people who were on the receiving end, they did not report it. They decided, or unfortunately, they reported it at a time where some of them had gone outside of the statute of limitation. So bringing that back to what we're talking about, it is important that you report what is taking place. And I know that sometimes it's difficult because you may be in shock and you don't want to believe. But when your mind starts to settle on what has happened, one of the first things that you have to do is report that, because it is so important to have it on record. Like anything else, like I said, with documentation, you have to keep an account for yourself. You have to position yourself to ensure that nothing conversely comes back on you. And the way that you do that is you have to report that in the workplace. The Supreme Court says that harassment must be reported before you can sue anybody, before you can bring any type of legal action against somebody. It must have been reported. So when you think about yourself in the workplace, you say Christine walking down the aisle looking fine in her dress, Christopher comes up, he says something. Next week, Christine calls herself having Christopher served because she's now going to sue him because he made these unwanted sexual advances from her. No, Christine. You have to report that information first before you can do anything legally. You have to report that in the workplace before you can do anything legally about that. That becomes so important because the workplace has to be put on notice that this has taken place. And it also gives them an opportunity to rectify the situation before legal action is even necessary. So they're like your first point of contact. When something happens, you must bring it to the workplace first and put them on notice that this is taking place. Now, I'll tell you this. You report it to the workplace. The workplace decides they want to sweep it under the rug. You at that point, you have done your due diligence, you have done your job, you have reported it. You can proceed in any manner that you see fit from that point forward because you have done what you were supposed to do. You brought it to them, gave them an opportunity to rectify it. If they have not done anything that is suitable, you can then move forward and bring across the legal action. Another thing that you have the right to do is file a complaint with EEOC. For those who don't know, EEOC is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. They are the ones that you would contact and say that this incident has taken place in the workplace. I have reported it. It has been insufficiently rectified, in my opinion. They will then look at all the information and they'll say, okay, what type of document, what type of proof do you have? That's when you pull out all those notes and things that you've been collecting, or all the things that the documentation of what exactly has taken place. You bring that out and you deliver that to EEOC, allow them to move forward with it from that point. If you file a claim, you are then protected from any retaliation or discrimination. Child, let me just talk about this for a second. So you file your claim with EEOC, right? And then what happens? You lose your job. No. Because you have then brought it to their attention, and legally, at that point, you are not allowed to have any retaliation or discrimination brought against you, because that will put the workplace in a place of jeopardy, that will bring a lot of trouble to them. So if they are found in that type of situation, that would be truly unfortunate for them. So I would say any workplace, those are things, that's where your EEOC, well, not your EEOC, your grievances, your grievance documents come into place, because in your grievance document, you're going to receive the information from the person who's bringing the claim, but then you're also going to let them know what the steps are in the process to having it rectified. And we hope that the incident does not need to go to EEOC, but sometimes it does. Sometimes we need that extra, backing in order for something to truthfully take place. The next step is you want to get a good lawyer, because you want to have somebody in your corner who is familiar with that type of litigation. You want to have somebody who knows exactly what the law is in terms of what can be done and what cannot be done. And to me, this is something where you can't afford to just try to do this on your own. And we know that legal representation can be very expensive, but then there are many modes where legal representation you don't have to pay for. But that is something that you have to do, is seek legal counsel to really represent and back you. Finally, if all else fails, everything that I've read, all the research said, and this was like their last step, and I guess this is the last draw, and they're saying that if nothing takes place, get the heck out of there. And it was just so funny that everything I read said, leave, in large letters, get the heck out of there, run, things like that, because what they're saying is, if you're going through all of this, you've experienced all of this, you've reported it, and nothing has been done, that is not an environment that you need to be in. So you need to find the quickest way to remove yourself from that environment before these things continue to happen or things get any worse. So that is definitely something to look at, is that what is my escape plan going to be? How am I going to get out of here? How am I going to put this whole thing behind me? So all that to say, I really wanted to share that with you guys. And oftentimes, like I said earlier, we don't do things because we don't know. And I just felt like with that type of a situation, with the knowledge that I have, and then with the research that I can do, I felt like I could bring that just as a reference for some people who may experience those type of things and not know specifically what they want to do or what their rights are or what they should do. But, in overall, I'll say breaking all that down in a few steps, number one, you want to document when the incident takes place, you want to document it for yourself. Number two, you want to report it and give the workplace an opportunity to rectify the situation. If you feel like they have not done their job in rectifying the situation in a satisfactory manner to you, you can feel free to report it to the EEOC. The EEOC will then take it on as a case, and they will do the research, the necessary due diligence to figure out what needs to take place, what's going on in this workplace, why haven't the proper channels been worked through, why haven't the proper steps been taken, and they will help you then resolve it. You want to get legal counsel if you feel that the incident warrants that you want to bring legal action against the company or the person. You definitely want to secure proper legal counsel, and then lastly, look at an escape plan to get up out of there. So those are my tips. That is just my brief, it's not really brief, but it is, assessment of sexual harassment in the workplace. Please keep in mind the different statistics that I talked about in the beginning, because to me, those statistics are rather alarming. When you think about 3 out of 4 women have experienced some sort of verbal sexual harassment, that is a lot. That is 77%. The statistics said 77% of women, 43% of men. That is a lot. It's a lot. And I think that is definitely something we can control when we look at controlling ourselves and the things that we do. So we have to remember that certain things are not appropriate. Certain things are not warranted, whether what our affiliation with the person may be. We don't know how people take certain things. We don't know what their past history. That plays a lot or a large part in it. You don't know what a person has dealt with in the past. So when you when you say something to them, or you make a certain type of advance, you don't understand how they take it and how it makes them feel. And the situation that birthed this topic for me, I didn't understand how serious or the severity of the situation to the person that it happened to until they started saying and using certain words, and it made me think, sir, get down, my little doggy. It started to make me think, this person really looks at this in a very serious manner. It is not something that we can just sweep under the rug. It is not something that can just pass by, in the night. She took very serious offense to what was done to her, and it made her feel a certain kind of way. And I started to feel that the second time that I kind of really heard the story and understood what happened, by the terms that she was using. And see, that's the thing. If you listen to what people say, you can get a sense of how they feel. You can listen to the words and, listen to a story, and you can say, oh, okay, yeah, they were upset, or this, they were very unhappy, or they were shocked, they were surprised. But then when they start using certain words, like those keywords, you start to really understand the severity and the depth of which they received what took place to them. So I'm not going to talk a hole in your ear, but I just wanted to give that to you guys as a hope for those who may have experienced something in their life or in the recent past, and you're looking for, the what should I do? Or if you feel like you may have been a person that have made certain comments to people in the workplace, this was for you, just so that you kind of understand how the person on the receiving end can look at it and how severe that the ramifications could be to you if that person is really and truly offended by what you say or what you do. And I just beg you to think about your relationships with people, because oftentimes if we think about what our relationship is, we won't do certain things, we won't say certain things. And even when we feel like our relationship is that close, my thing is, would you want that said to you? Would you want those things done to you? And so I say, for gentlemen who do a lot of this stuff, think about if it was your mother. How would you feel if that was your mother, someone was making those advances towards your mother, or God forbid that was your daughter? How would you feel? If you are a female and you're doing it to a male, how would you feel if that was done to your son or somebody younger in your family? How would you feel in that sense? And then for those who have the authority and opportunity to rectify situations like that, I would say think about it, yes, from the standpoint of the person who it has taken place to, but also think about it as if it was somebody in your family, and just be fair. When you make your determinations, be fair to both parties that are involved, be fair to them, and try to come up with the best possible solution that is amicable for both sides, because ultimately both sides have to agree with whatever the decision is, because if they don't agree, that is where things are then taken forward. And a lot of times once it leaves the workplace, it becomes a totally different animal. So those are my words of advice. This has been Sheer Chat Season 2, Episode 1. I am so excited to have brought that to you, and I have a couple of other things that I look forward to bringing to you in the upcoming weeks. We plan to be on every Monday at 8 p.m. So join us here. So I would appreciate if you set your little notifications, click the little bell at the top, so that when I do go live, you'll receive a notification. I will, like I did before, kind of send out a little teaser to let you know what we're going to talk about, and give you a heads up about all that kind of stuff. So I thoroughly enjoyed having you here. So thank you to those who are on YouTube. Thank you to those who are on Instagram. Thank you to those who are on Facebook. And Lord knows I have a couple of different things going on. So, you see, well, you don't see, but I have all these cameras working here that are going to upload to various formats. So we're looking to just reach the masses. So again, I say thank you for joining me this evening, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.